Right. The next two questions, which come from the same person, are prefaced by a bit of explanation or comment. Presumably, the greatest danger the spiritual community has to constantly face is that of its degeneration into a group. In recent years, there has been some emphasis on establishing a positive group in the FWBO. No matter how good and positive the positive group is, it is still a group. I believe that there will always be only a fine dividing line between a positive group and a negative one. A positive group can very easily become a negative one. This is true insofar as the positive group does not contain within itself a spiritual community, especially a transcendental community. I have said before that really, in the long run, there is no existence of a positive group without a spiritual community at its heart or as its nucleus. So my first question is, what do you consider we need to constantly be on the lookout for to ensure the spiritual community does not become a mere group? What are the first signs that will indicate the rot may be setting in? Second question, do you think that some of the more experienced order members can ever be in a situation where they have sufficient influence to manipulate, whether consciously or unconsciously, the positive group around them for their own ends, i.e. to maintain the certain position on the hierarchical ladder? Right, first question first. Yes, we certainly need to be constantly on the lookout to ensure that the spiritual community does not become a mere group. So what are the first signs that will indicate the rot may be setting in? I think this question is really answered when we remember the definition of the spiritual community. I mean, what is the spiritual community, or how do we distinguish between the spiritual community on the one hand and the group, even the positive group on the other? The spiritual community consists of individuals. So when you notice that there are fewer individuals around, or individuals are disappearing, and by of course individuals we don't mean individualists, when everybody starts acting collectively, as a mass, and not as a free association of individuals, well then you can start thinking that the rot has well and truly set in. So it's the absence of individuality. If you start noticing that people aren't thinking and speaking and acting as individuals, that they're simply identifying themselves as a group, that they are group members now, not individuals, then, yes, the rot has set in. One could give all sorts of other indications, but they really all boil down to this. You might, for instance, visit a community. You might feel there's a very happy, positive atmosphere, where the people are not acting, they're not functioning as individuals, so that it is not a spiritual community. So second question, do you think that some of the more experienced order members can ever be in a situation where they have sufficient influence to manipulate, whether consciously or unconsciously, the positive group around them for their own ends, i.e. to maintain a certain position in the hierarchical ladder? I think this question is probably a little unfortunately phrased. One presumably is envisioning a situation within the positive group, say outside the FWBO. Let's, for instance, suppose that an order member is a teacher, and supposing he's a teacher in a really good school where there's a good positive atmosphere. So, what will be his effect? What will be his influence there? Would it be a good idea for, say, an order member to be in that sort of situation? And the question says, manipulate, whether consciously or unconsciously. Well, manipulate is a verb with a certain connotation. Perhaps we should avoid it. And as for unconsciously, well, if you're really an individual, and an order member should be an individual, well, you won't do anything, in fact, something of that sort perhaps you couldn't do, unconsciously. You would be in the midst of that positive group, and certainly it would be a good thing if you as an order member, as an individual, within that positive group, were able to exert a positive influence. By positive influence meaning an influence on the side of individuality. You have to say, if you're a teacher, all right, get to know your pupils, treat them as individuals, encourage them to think for themselves. In that way, you, as an individual teacher in that school, would be influencing the boys or the girls who came into contact with you in the direction of individuality. Of course, it might not be so easy or simple or straightforward as that. The headmaster might get wind of what you were doing, and you might even be asked not to function in that sort of way. One could only try, one could only see. But such a way of functioning is possible, assuming that the group within which the order member, within which the individual is functioning, is really a positive group. I doubt very much whether you could function like that, say, within a political party, because the political party by its very nature seems to be not at all positive, even quite negative, on our terms. So, and political parties are quite big. They wield quite a lot of power, and it's very unlikely that you, as one solitary individual, could do very much to counteract those negative tendencies. But if you do see a positive situation, a positive group situation outside the friends, into which you as an individual can usefully enter and exert a wholesome influence, well, it's your right, to use that expression, to do that, to enter into that situation, if you think that that is a good thing and a useful thing for you to do. It certainly can't be ruled out altogether. Right, I could say quite a lot more than that, but we do have quite a few more questions to get through, so let me leave it for the moment.